Sababa. Hello, everyone. I'm Tal Heinrich, a spokesperson for the Prime Minister's office. Thank you for joining us today. I will start with a brief update before taking a few questions. Over 8,150 Hamas rockets have been fired at Israel since the October 7th massacre. Over 1,400 Israelis have been killed and 5,400 injured. The IDF has updated that as it stands, there are at least 239 Israeli hostages. In terms of an operational update, the IDF continues its coordinated ground, air, and sea operations in the Gaza Strip. Over the last few days, the IDF struck over 600 terror targets, including weapons depots, dozens of anti-tank missile launching positions, as well as hideouts and staging grounds used by Hamas. The IDF successfully eliminated 4 prominent Hamas operatives, including the commander of the Hamas's naval forces in its central brigade and the commander of the anti-tank missile unit in the Tufah battalion. On the northern front, Israel continues to strike Hezbollah infrastructure in Lebanon, including a terror cell near Rosh HaNikra just a couple of hours ago. Turning now to our 239 hostages who have been in Hamas captivity for over 3 weeks now. As we have done in previous briefings, I want to highlight one of the hostages, one of our brothers and sisters. This is Hirsch Goldberg, Poland. Hirsch is a dual American and Israeli citizen. He just turned 23 years old, and he lives in Jerusalem. Hirsch is curious. He's a voracious reader and a Hapoel Jerusalem soccer fan. He likes to first listen and then speak. Hirsch has no ego. Hirsch was at the Nova Music Festival on October 7th. He was there to have a good time. When the massacre began, Hirsch and some of his friends managed to escape to a shelter. Hamas terrorists came to the doorway of the shelter. They threw in hand grenades and they fired machine guns at the 29 music lovers crushed inside. Most of them were murdered on the spot. Well, Hirsch survived, but his left arm was blown off, and he was then ordered onto a Hamas pickup truck, which took him into Gaza. His last phone signal, was at 10:25 a.m. in the morning of October 7th, and his family have not heard from him since. Now, we want to see Hirsch, along with our 239 hostages, home, released immediately and unconditionally. Israel also calls on the International Red Cross to do its job. It has been 23 days, and our hostages have still not been visited by the Red Cross, their representatives. Now, finally, I'd like to address the rising wave of anti-Semitic and anti-Israel attacks around the globe. Last night, we saw live on our screens what globalize the Intifada really means. It was a pogrom in Russia, where a mob raced towards an airport runway in search of Jewish and Israeli passengers arriving on a flight from Tel Aviv. The bloodthirsty mob demanded that people hand over their passports to check if they were Jewish or Israeli. They shouted Allahu Akbar as they searched for any Jew they could get their hands on. I wish I could tell you that scenes like this were unusual, but unfortunately, these are not isolated incidents. Just 2 weeks ago, a Cornell University professor praised Hamas's October 7th massacre as exhilarating and exciting. Is it any surprise then that yesterday we saw horrific lynch scenes at Cornell with Jewish students told to avoid certain buildings, police dispatched for their protection, and many locking themselves, in fact, in their dorm rooms? A few hours ago, we heard reports of 20 Jewish schools in Paris receiving bomb threats and needing to evacuate thousands of Jewish school children. And 5 days ago, Los Angeles police arrested a suspect who broke into a Jewish family's home, shouting "Free Palestine" and threatening to kill those inside. An Israeli tourist shot and killed in cold blood in Egypt on October 8th. A school teacher stabbed to death in France on October 13th. A synagogue burned to the ground in Tunisia on October 17th. Calls to gas the Jews outside the Sydney Opera House before Israel's counteroffensive against Hamas even began. I mean, should I keep going? There's plenty more. for some, the massacre of 1,400 Jews is not enough. They want to see it executed globally. This is what globalized the Intifada means. This is what from the river to the sea means. This is what marches in support of Hamas's terror means. It means dead Jews, dead Israelis, no matter where they are in the world. And it's time that the world recognized that anti-Semitism is alive and well. It's time the world recognized that never again is now. Thank you. I will now take your questions, if we have them. You can raise your hand, you can type them in the Zoom, and we will address them. Oh, I have one question that I see. Oh, one second. I can't read the name. It's too far.
It's from Coach Winehouse.
Coach Winehouse, yes, please. You're unmuted. Coach. So unfortunately, I don't have much information about that particular release right now. I'm just, as I was sitting for the daily briefing, I just here on my computer, I saw the announcement in Hebrew popped, so I'm not sure yet because I don't have much information. And before that, I was sitting here doing back-to-back 3 interviews on American TV. So I will find out, of course, but I haven't seen any official announcement in English so far. All I saw was the name that you mentioned and the fact that she has been released, but no expansion really on the background which led to this release. So I have nothing new to add on the information that you just shared. Yeah. So we have Jim Williams. I see it right there. Yeah. What can I tell you, Jim? We are saying it very clearly that our enemy is not the Palestinian people who don't support Hamas, who don't assist them, and the Palestinian people who recognize the state of Israel and the Jewish people right for a life. They're not the ones who are calling for the murdering of all Jews as it stands in Hamas's charter or for the obliteration of the state of Israel. So we have to differentiate between the Palestinian civilian population and between Hamas. Yes, true, the Hamas ideology is prevalent among large circles of the Palestinian people, but not everyone in Gaza obviously is a terrorist. The Palestinian people, we are not targeting them. We are in fact trying to minimize their suffering and minimize the civilian casualties in Gaza. And to your question, if that message is getting across, I hope it does. We are doing everything possible. We can't say it in different words. We keep repeating that. Israeli lawmakers, Israeli diplomats, us here in the Prime Minister's office, the IDF spokesperson, this is what we're saying. But unfortunately, many of these anti-Israel and anti-Semitic displays that we're seeing in parts of the Western world even are simply driven by pure anti-Semitism of, people who are ignorant about the current situation, about history, people of hate, truly, of the Jewish people, because we're hearing all of these slogans, of from the river to the sea and so on, that Palestine will be free, which means a Judenrein, Jewish-free territory between the Mediterranean and Jordan River. And we see the slogans of genocide, calls for genocide for the Jews, or the Arabic slogan of, Khaybar ya Yahud, Jesh Muhammad Sayaud, which basically calls for the massacre of the Jewish people based on a Quranic precedent from the days of the Prophet Muhammad. So some people who are, I guess, in these protests are simply anti-Semitic, and they hide their jihadi or Nazi ideologies. They disguise them, rather, with Western terminology. And others, they just speak it out as it is, outright. I hope that our message is getting across, that the IDF is doing everything possible and acting in a very surgical way in Gaza when we come to complete our mission and dismantle Hamas and bring this terrorist regime down. We don't want to hurt civilians. Yes. Do we have another question?
Tal, there's Satyendra Kanodia.
Mm-hmm.
I'll bring him up. You can.
Okay. Kanyoja? I think I'm mispronouncing the name because I can't read it. The computer is very foul for me. Hi, I can hear you. Hi. And it's terrible what these families are going through. I can tell you that I have a friend, in fact, whose family was just today, day 24, right, notified that his brother has been abducted into Gaza, just today. And keep in mind that we also have many Israelis who are still unaccounted for, which means we don't know if there are bodies here in Israel that were burned and we can't recognize them, or there are bodies inside Gaza that we didn't reach them, or that they were abducted. So that's why you see the number of the hostages being updated from day to day. So, of course, the hostage situation is making our ground operation and the operation at large very, very complex. We want to see all hostages being released, and we call on Hamas to do so unconditionally and immediately. But the reason why we did see that 4 of the hostages have been released so far, putting aside the last hostage that we just heard about, because we don't know what was the background there, is because of mounting international pressure. So we will continue to exert both military pressure and diplomatic pressure on Hamas to bring to their release. And we call on the Red Cross to do their duty, and as I just said in the briefing, and to press hard to try to get access to them in order to examine their condition. Obviously, we will do everything possible to get these hostages back to their families. This is a torture of mind, soul, and the physical body for all these families who didn't sleep for 23 nights now. Some of them don't even know the fate of their loved ones. Most of them, in fact. We have more questions? No? Okay. All right. That will conclude the daily briefing for today. Thank you. See you tomorrow.